Hey, yeah, what's up? This disciple Marshall Occurrence Rain back up in this anti-Illuminati all day, anti-America all day, anti-cop all day. Yeah, so this video is going to be about the seven living generations. The seven living generations in America. There are there are seven living generations. That's a seven. There are literally seven living generations. This is what I found out doing some research last night. It's interesting. There's only 11 generations, and there's only seven, as far as we're concerned, there's only really seven generations that uh, are important. I hate to say it like that, that are really, better to say that are relevant. There's only seven relevant generations, and I'm going to go through all of them, and I'm going to explain, as far as America, which generation failed us, why we have the problems we have, which generations are most responsible for that, and which generations uh, helped us. Because there are generations that helped us, there's generations that were in the way, and you have to add the spiritual element to this, the spiritual the spiritual dynamic to this situation. You have to add it to it because spiritually speaking, there were generations that helped us, and spiritually speaking, there were generations that uh, destroyed us, failed us, and you can't leave out the spiritual aspect. So I'm going to go through these seven generations, the seven living generations. There's only seven of them. Okay, so I'm going to go through the first one. The first one is the lost generation. This is literally what it's called. If you Google these generations, you can study them deeper. You can get more information on them. You can get more history on them. But I'm just going to breeze over them. I'm not going to go into depth about them. I'm going to go into which ones, like I said, failed us and which ones helped us. And I'm just going to name these seven generations. So the first one, the oldest one that I'm going to name, I'm going to go from oldest to youngest to the present generation. All right. So the first one is lost generation. The lost generation. I'm going to give the dates for each one. The lost generation is a real generation. That's the name that the Americans gave this generation. The lost generation. That's what they named it. I know it's interesting. It sounds a little, it's a little different. It's a little unique, I guess you could say. It's called the lost generation. The date for this generation is 1883, the year 1883 to the year 1900. The lost generation is from the year 1883 to the year 1900. That's the lost generation. Okay. The next one is the greatest generation. That's what it's called. These are the names that the Americans gave it. The greatest generation. The greatest generation dates as far as when people are born. These are dates when the people were born. These are real times that measure generations. So the greatest generation is starting from 1901 to 1927. That's the greatest generation. So everybody born in 1901 through 1927 is in the greatest generation. My grandmother was born in 1917, so she was born in the greatest generation. The next one is the silent generation. People born in 1928 through 1945 here in America. These people are in the silent generation. The silent generation is from 1928 to 1945. The next one is the baby boomers. The baby boomers are from 1946 to 1964. Everybody born between 1946 and 1964 are in the baby boomers generation. The reason why it's called the baby boomers is because there was a baby boom, if you will, when the Americans came back from World War II, they were having babies, and that's why they call it they're called the baby boomers. They were the babies that were conceived after the Americans came back from World War II. The baby boomers, again, were born from 1946 to 1964, and there are two sections of baby boomers. The first baby boomers were born from 1946 to 1954, and baby boomers second generation is born from 1955 to 1964. You can make one full big generation, but Wikipedia breaks it down into two generations. Baby Boomer 1, 1946 through 1954, and Baby Boomer 2 from 1955 to 1964. But if you want to add it as just one big generation, the baby boomers are from 1946 to 1964. Almost 20 years. Okay, 18 years. Okay. The next generation is Generation X, which I am a part of. Generation X starts from 1965 to 1984. Generation X starts from 1965 to 1984. The millennials is next, born from 1981 to 1995. See, I am actually, me personally, I am in two generations because I am born in 1981. So Generation X, by Wikipedia's information, starts from 1965 to 1984, and I'm born in 81, so I'm in that generation, which is Generation X, 1965 to 1984. See, I'm born in 81, so I'm in there. And I'm also in the millennials, which starts at 1981 to 1995. So the millennials starts from 1981, which the year I was born, to 1995. The last newest generation that we have here is Generation Alpha. This is the latest generation. This is the babies right now. These are all the little babies right now. This is Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha starts from 2011 that generation will end, and a new one will start at 2026. Generation Alpha is from 2011 to 2025. So any children born between 2011 to the present time and up until 2025 will be Generation Alpha. So there you have it. That's all the 7 generations: Lost Generation, Greatest Generation, Silent Generation, Baby Boomers Generation, Generation X, Millennials. Oh, and I'm sorry, Generation Z, which is from 1996 to 2010. Then you have Generation Alpha, which is 2011 through 2025. So again, Lost Generation, 1883 to 1900. Greatest Generation from 1901 to 1927. Silent Generation from 1928 to 1945. Baby Boomers from 1946 to 1964. 2 generations of baby boomers. The first one 1946 to 1954. The second one from 1955 to 1964. Generation X is 1965 to 1984. The Millennials is from 1981 to 1995. Generation Z is from 1996 to 2010. Generation Z again is 1996 to 2010. Any kids born in 1996 to 2010, that's Generation Z. And the present generation is Generation Alpha, 2011 to 2025. These are the 7 living generations. Now, as you can see, they start from 1883 all the way now down to the present time. So I'm covering all these generations from all the way back to 1883. I think that's covering pretty much all of our history, whether it be the music, the culture, the presidents. That's pretty much covering basically most of what we have here in America. All the the bulk of the history here. So now I'm going to cover the people that were born in these generations. Okay, MLK and Malcolm X were born in the silent generation. MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X were born in the silent generation, which is from 1928 to 1945. The silent generation was the generation that really helped America. Just from the people, just from the persons of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. The silent generation is the ones that helped us. They the ones that was talking. Ironically, they were the ones that spoke to us. And they come from the silent generation. I think that's ironic. Jesse Jackson also came from the silent generation. And Louis Farrakhan, Minister Louis Farrakhan, also came from the silent generation. So you see, the silent generation helped America. The silent generation really helped America. That's what I want you to understand. The silent generation. Look up the silent generation, go through the history, go through what they did and what they didn't do, go through all the culture during that time. Do your research on the silent generation. This is what they call it. This is what they actually name it. There's reasons why they name these generations certain specific names. I didn't make up the names. These are the names that the American culture gave these generations. So the silent generation, people who were born between 1928 and 1945, gave us a lot of help. They were used spiritually in many ways. Okay, they helped us a lot. Billy Graham, I think, was born. The minister Billy Graham, I think, was born in the greatest generation, which is from 1901 through 1927. The silent generation, though, is the generation that really, really helped America. And I only have to use 2 people to prove that point. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and Louis Farrakhan, present day. He is from also the silent generation. Okay, so Generation X is where I come from. You know, that's where you have the Beyoncés. Beyonce is from Generation X. You know, Kim Kardashian is from Generation X. I think even Kanye West is from Generation X. Tupac Shakur from Generation X. Jay-Z from Generation X. You have a lot of great people from your community that are from Generation X. A lot of athletes, musicians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Generation X is, if anybody's going to change America, anybody's going to start a revolution, most likely they're going to come from Generation X. That's a 7. If you look at all these generations, this is all we have. A lot of people always rely on the youth to start to start revolutions. Some people do out of ignorance, but sometimes throughout history, with any country, sometimes the youth, um, they're too held down by snares and captivities that they can't even see, and they don't have experience and hands-on experience to bring about a revolution. You know, revolutions don't start with just physical strength, with physique strength. It takes a lot of other types of strength. So here in America, the only generation that there is hope to bring a revolution would be Generation X. I'm telling you right now, Generation X is the only one that can do it. Not these new generations. I don't care what they know. I don't care what their passions are. They don't have the hands-on experience that Generation X had with just having the greatest. We had the Generation X saw the greatest of everything. We saw the greatest of musicians, the greatest of culture, the greatest of everything as far as culture and how America even behaved and united and everything. The energy, the vibrations. Generation X is going to be the only generation that can change America or start a revolution. It's the only generation that can do it. Generation Z and the millennials, they're too. A lot of them they're too arrogant, and they're too. They don't. The arrogance doesn't really have substance. You know, generation, and no disrespect, but Generation X is we have experience with the greatest. We've seen the greatest. We've been around the greatest vibrations. We've been we have absorbed many energies and many histories, uh, and and uh, and even our parents just set us up to be the greatest. That's a seven. But it's a catch-22. It's a double-edged sword that I'm going to get to concerning our parents, because our parents were the baby boomers, and that's who I'm going to get to. Like I told you, the silent generation is the most influential. I'm gonna put it like this: the most helpful generation, just through the persons of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. Those two individuals were so powerful to America. It's no denying the generation that they came from was very helpful to America. That's the silent generation. People that were born from 1928 to 1945. That's the silent generation, where we get Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and Louis Farrakhan. Okay? Now, we're going to get to now the infamous baby boomers. This is what inspired my whole research on the generations of America. It all started from the baby boomers, and it gets to my the crust of what I want to talk about. The baby boomers were the ones that um, they had the throne, if you will. They were the sweet spot to empower Generation X to bring about the revolution that I'm talking about. The revolution was supposed to happen long time ago by the hands of Generation X. That's a seven. The problem was the baby boomers did not successfully pass the torch, pass the baton to Generation X. That's a seven. What they did was they sat back and hoarded their greatness, and they hoarded their thrones, and they hoarded their information, and they were very condescending on Generation X. That's a seven. At the same time, the baby boomers whether it's baby boomer generation 1 or baby boomer generation 2, they were the generations that were the parents of Generation X. They were supposed to empower us, father us, mother us, nurture us, but they didn't do that. And I'm going to show you why they didn't do it. I'm going to give you more than one reason why they didn't do it. And I'm going to, and for the record, I'm going to keep, when I have great revelation of stuff like this, and I get epiphanies like this, I'm going to progress this message. This message is very progressive. So what that means is I'm going to talk about this now, and then I may have another message about this 3 or 4 months down the line that is progressive concerning this with more information on it. But right now, this is the second video about this. Okay, this is the more and it's the more progressive version. The first video that I made about this was basically stating that the baby boomers failed Generation X. Well, not Generation X. Excuse me. They failed the whole country. It was all on the baby boomers. That's why you have to, out of all the generations, as far as understanding failures and how we can bring about solutions, you should go back and study baby boomer generation 1 and baby boomer generation 2. You need to study both of them. And just study the whole baby boomers generation, because this is the generation that was supposed to, now that we see history and the timeline of history and what it became and what it didn't become, we now can look at all these generations and realize, okay, which generation is responsible for this and which generation is responsible for that. That's a 7. Because now, and don't take this personal for the younger generations, they can't possibly bring about the revolution. They can't possibly do it. There is too many captivities. So now, what we have to understand is the revolution starts within older generations that took in information, that had hands-on reality, if you will, with greatness and great vibrations and great experiences overall. It's Generation X that would bring about a revolution. Look at all the people that are in Generation X. Beyonce, Jay-Z, they're a couple. They're both Generation X. Kanye West is in Generation X. Look how outspoken he is. I could go on and on. Tupac was from Generation X. Look how outspoken he was. Generation X, just based on the people that I named, Tupac and Kanye. Look at those two individuals. I can go on and on with Generation X. Study Generation X, and listen to how they think. Listen to how they speak. You can't get that from any other generation. That's a 7. It comes from what we've seen and what we experienced here in America. And we're the only hope. Our generation, Generation X, is the only hope. It's a tricky situation because, people are cliche about the children. They think that that's what the hope is. They think that the hope is in the future of the children, not this time, not in America. Because they're being taught so many different things. Everything that we were taught, they're being taught that some of that was wrong. They're being taught that a lot of that was not the truth and not the way. And a lot of the morality that we were taught, they're not being taught that. Okay, I'm just being very, very clear about, frank about it, brutally honest about it. They just are not given that morality that we were given. They're not given that purity that we were given. So in the case in America, the revolution is not in the hands of the youth. The revolution is in the hands of Generation X. Listen to what I just said now, because you can study all of these generations and you can see exactly what I'm saying to you. The greatness is already behind us. The greatness is not ahead of us. All the young generations can do is be innovative. They can be innovative, futuristic, have ideas, but I'm talking about a revolution. I'm talking about changing everything. I'm not talking about, oh, I'm not trying to be cliche or be cute. You know, when I say a revolution, I'm talking about a real one. I'm talking about a whole change in everything. And it's impossible, almost impossible for the younger generations to bring it about because they don't have hands-on experience with the greatness and the energies that came from the sweet spots in America. Generation X experienced those sweet spots that these generations cannot experience. In many ways, we experience different things, you know, and it's just, you know, you would have to be from our generation to understand. I'm not being biased. If the new generation could do it, I would say all the hope is in them, but it's not. The hope is in Generation X, people of Generation X, collectively, Generation X. Okay. Now, going to get to the baby boomers because this is what this is all about. This is what this is the crust of the situation. Like I said, the baby boomers were born from 1946 to 1964. They are the ones that, if you just look at those dates, 1946 to 1964, that's around the time of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X. They were the children around that time. Now, I remind you, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. would have been, came from the parent, they were the parents, the parent generation of the baby boomers. So all the people that were around Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr.'s age, which was the silent generation, were the parents of the baby boomers. Now you see where I'm going with this? So therefore, this would be the children of Malcolm X, if you will, the children of Martin Luther King Jr., if you will, all the children soaking up the information that they were putting out, the energy that they were putting out. Now you see where I'm going with this? And then the kids that soaked up the information, the children of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., were the parents of Generation X. Now you see? So again, silent generation. That's Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr.'s generation. The baby boomers soaked up all of that information, that energy, and everything. That was our parents. And they were supposed to give us what they soaked up from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. generation, being that generation being their parents. So basically, Martin Luther King Jr. and MLK and Malcolm X, their generation was the grandparents of Generation X. That's a 7. Now you see where I'm going with this? Now you see why I'm telling you that Generation X is the revolution, because we are the grandchildren of the silent generation, which is the generation of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. You see the setup, right? You see the setup. Now you see why I would say that. Now you see I'm not being biased. We are the generation that are the grandchildren of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr.'s generation. All the people born in that generation of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., Generation X, which I am a part of, we are the grandchildren of that generation. So it's safe to say we are the revolution. Because think about it. By the time our parents soaked up all what Martin Luther King Jr. and the had to say and Malcolm X had to say, and all the energy that came with the entire generation. Listen to that part. The entire generation, all the energy of America during that time. They soaked up all of that. Baby boomers. The baby boomers soaked up all Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had to offer. They were the children sitting back watching and absorbing like a sponge all that energy. That's a 7. That was Generation X's parents. And they were supposed to pour into us everything they soaked up from Martin Luther King Jr.'s generation. Malcolm X generations, Louis Farrakhan's generation. But they didn't, but here's the problem. They didn't pour into us what they received from Martin Luther King Jr.'s family generation and Malcolm X generation, which was the silent generation. The baby boomers did not release to us, Generation X, what they received from the silent generation, which is the generation of Louis Farrakhan, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King Jr. Listen, this is all about progression, guys. From generation to generation. People will sit up and say, yeah, the next generation this. You ain't, listen, you're not even, educate yourself on it so that you can understand what went wrong. That's a 7. Oh, this just didn't happen to be. This just didn't happen to be. This all went wrong for a reason. You know, I'm not one of those people that believe in fate. Oh, well, you know, what will be, then what's